Good day, everyone. I am Vakas Malik, a forgiveness coach. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Carolyn, an expert in the transformative journey of releasing resentment and finding inner peace. Carolyn, welcome and thank you for joining us. We are eager to delve into your world of forgiveness and healing. Carolyn, you are an expert in healing people, release resentment, and find inner peace. Can you share a bit about your journey and what led you to focus on forgiveness and healing?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is really special. I really was excited when I saw that you too are a forgiveness coach. Mine, for me, all started in childhood. I had a really rocky childhood. It was filled with a lot of chaos and trauma. There were good things too, but I left with the overall feeling of worthlessness, shame, feelings like that. So I was pretty much a mess. I resented my past, my childhood, for 30 years while I drank over it. So that's how I handled my emotions, was I numbed them. And what the alcohol did instead was fuel my resentment. It just made it worse. I got married to a fellow alcoholic and spent 20 years with him until one day I left the marriage because I had grown to love another man that was a mutual friend. That had developed over months, and I did a lot of journaling about it as to why I was having these feelings and just what I should do about it. After about 9 months of journaling, I realized the marriage was bad and wasn't going to go anywhere. And this other man was displaying behavior like he liked a woman, me. So I left my marriage to make myself available to this other man. Well, he didn't care for me. He said he was just being kind to me, which those words went through my heart like a knife. I responded to my devastation and feeling shattered by drinking and crying for 2 months. I didn't even feed myself. I couldn't. Until one day I realized I was really killing myself. I was really killing myself. I decided, or I realized, I did not want to die. So I prayed to a God I didn't even believe in, asking for help because I couldn't do this anymore. Within a month, I was traveling from Sausalito, California, where I lived, to San Diego, California, to live with my former bartender who was getting sober herself. I decided to go on this road trip to get a handle on my drinking. I went to stay for a couple of weeks, and I stayed for a year and a half and got sober. It's been quite a journey, really a beautiful journey. 4 years into it, I discovered a way to forgive my past. So I forgave both of my parents. This is how that happened.
Right.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Take your time.
Okay. I had returned to Sausalito and the Bay Area at about 4 years sober, 3 years sober, I mean. And I was one day writing a self appraisal. Only this time I was looking specifically at the ways in which my behavior had led to the demise of my relationships with men in my life. And I realized that I used to get drunk and yell and scream at them that they were worthless and would never amount to anything. I was horrified to remember this. Thank goodness they've all forgiven me. But more to the point is, I didn't even mean it about them. I meant it about myself. That was a huge aha moment, because it stood to reason that if I was saying those things to men, calling them worthless, and I didn't mean it about them, I meant it about myself, it stood to reason, and it was logical, that my father didn't mean, he called me worthless and said I wouldn't ever amount to anything, and he didn't mean it about me. He meant it about himself. This was life-changing, absolutely life-changing, because suddenly I saw him as a fellow human being who was wounded with the worthless wound, just like me. I had compassion for that wound. Over the period of about a year, I went back and forth between compassion and anger until one day I noticed that I had forgiven them. I think what happened was I opened my heart and created a space by being compassionate, and into that empty space flowed forgiveness. I can't tell you how tremendous the peace and freedom were that I felt right away. Right away, I felt it. And I've continued to feel it all this time. In fact, as you know, I now teach forgiveness and coach people on how to forgive. And that's my forgiveness story. And that's how I got into it.
Right. Resentment can affect various aspects of our lives, from relationships to work. How do your services and books empower individuals to overcome resentment in these different areas?
Well, I do use my books. One is The Art of Forgiveness, A Promise of Peace. And the other is Opening the Gates of the Heart, Images That Heal and the Stories Behind Them. And I use both of these. I go through a process called the Yippee method of healing that I created. Yippee is an acronym, and it stands for yearn, investigate, process, practice, evolve, and empower. We start out with awareness in the yearn stage. Well, first we start out yearning for peace. So that's the thing we're yearning for, is peace and freedom. So we go through awareness, then willingness, letting go, acceptance, and gratitude. Then we go into the process stage and we look at our hurts, our resentments, and we write them all down, and we work on them throughout the process stage. I have some writing exercises I do. And my cat's coming around again, so I'm trying to keep her away. Then we move into the practice stage where we put it all into practice. The evolve stage is a really big one in the sense that we do a self-appraisal. And we look not only at the kind and loving things we've done to people in the last 2 weeks, but all the unkind, unloving, and mean behavior that we've displayed in the last 2 weeks. In order to stop from beating ourselves up, I highly recommend looking at the mean and unkind and unloving things with curiosity. Wow, look what I did. I wonder why I did that, I would say to myself. Come on, lie down, Beanie. Lie down. I'm sorry. So that takes away the hurt and the heaviness and the shame when you're curious, when you look with curiosity. Then we get to the empower stage, which is where forgiveness begins and ends. I mean, that's the stage that we address it. And so we go into various exercises about forgiveness. And that basically is the program that I teach people. It's an 8-week course. I'm actually getting ready to do another one, an 8-week course, and we will be using books, my 2 books also. Come on, Peony. So that's my program.
Right. Self-forgiveness is often a significant challenge for many. How do your coaching
Yes.
and resources help individuals address and release self-resentment?
That one's harder. Again, I have people identify what it is that they resent about themselves. And then I have them look with curiosity about what was behind that resentment. Was it hurt, disappointment, shame, humiliation, betrayal? All sorts of emotions are usually behind our resentment. And I have them look at that as it applies to them. Then I have them work the program on it and apply compassion to themselves so that they can let themselves off the hook and realize that they did the best they could at the time with what they knew at the time. And now that they know differently, they can behave differently. Are you familiar with what's his name? I forget his name, it'll come to me, who claims that that forgiveness, self-forgiveness, is a blessing. That when we hurt someone else, that's a blessing because we have brought them to their spirituality. And they may learn to forgive themselves and get over their angst. And they may even write us later and thank us for the resentment, the rejection, whatever it happens to be. So, yes, I look at self-forgiveness also. That's a big one.
Right. Resentment can often feel overwhelming, making the path to forgiveness seem daunting. How do you help individuals like the client with 25 years of sobriety tackle long time resentments and make them feel more manageable?
Well, it takes, I'm not clear on your question. You want to know how long it takes to go through that process?
Yeah.
Well, usually by about the fifth or sixth weeks of the class, people begin to soften up a little bit. They begin to get willing to forgive. So by the time we make it to the 8th week, people that are going to forgive right away have forgiven. Then there's those people who it takes longer. And I just have them address and continually address their feelings and what's behind them. Because once we identify what's behind our feelings of resentment, we go back in time to figure out where that originated. And we give ourselves compassion for that period of our lives and that behavior that we endured. We give ourselves compassion for that. And that gradually morphs into forgiveness. At least that's been my experience.
Right. So what's your vision for the future, Carolyn, regarding your work in helping individuals release resentment and find peace? How do you plan to continue making a positive impact on the lives of those who seek your guidance?
I want to reframe my class a little bit, the Yippie method of healing. And I want to use my books more, especially the forgiveness book. Well, and the Gates book, the Opening the Gates of the Heart, which is a picture book of wrought iron gates and verses I wrote to go with the gates. The verses are really deep. They're very thought-provoking and healing. And so I want to use that book so that others can begin to heal from their resentment and their feelings behind the resentment. And I plan to start an 8-week class coming up here real soon. I'll be advertising it or promoting it on Facebook and to my email list. I'm hopeful that I get a lot of people that will be interested. And we're going to be using both books in the course of that class.
That's amazing. Thank you, Carolyn, for sharing your wisdom and insights on the profound subject of forgiveness and healing, especially in the context of resentment. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.